Welcome to The Growth Agenda, a sales and marketing podcast presented by Kvadrant Consulting. In this podcast, we explore how commercial leaders can provide new answers to the old question, where will growth come from? We hope you enjoy today's episode.
Hi, Daniel.
Nice to meet you, Oliver. Nice to meet you, Jeppe. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for coming. Welcome to our little podcast studio. We've been quite excited to welcome you today. You are the Global Senior Manager of Sales Operating Model and Deployment at VELUX. So a big long title, but in the global ComEx to translate it to something tangible. And the reason we've been kind of looking forward to talking to you is that you have a broad kind of set of experience, both from when you started at frontline sales, then when you were a sales manager in a few different roles, and now when you are enabling others actually from a global perspective, from a global ComEx department in VELUX.
Thanks for the intro. You're right. Back in the days, I had real impact frontline. I can remember. That's correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what we thought could be interesting is if we talk a little bit about those transitions, first from kind of succeeding in the role as a frontline sales rep, and then making others succeed in your team, and then making other markets succeed. So being kind of further removed, but also having impact on more and more sales reps out there.
Yep. Nice.
And I think maybe we could start just with a little bit about you and your background and how you got into sales.
Yep, sure. Thanks for the first question, invitation again overall. I guess how I stepped into sales was I did regularly my school stuff, and then I started to doing a job, and this was very back office driven and so on. Parallel, I studied business administration and operations in the evening school, finalized this also to my bachelor's degree, did a lot of other school stuff and so on. And then a headhunter came, so in the industry before VELUX, I was taking care on the facade industry. I was selling to very regional carpenters and stuff like that. But it was always about glazing, energy savings, G-values, all these technical, unsexy things. But then came a headhunter and said, did you ever interacted with architects? I did not. So it was for me, like sales often is, a bit fake it till you make it. So I said, yeah, sure, interacted with architects as well. And then they said, yeah, maybe you're fit for VELUX. We had a lot of interviews, and then I got hired as a key account or project sales manager for a region in Germany. And I interacted mainly with projects and architects. And honestly, I had no clue in the beginning what to do. So it was a little bit track record and bootstrapped and learning by doing. Yeah. So this was my first steps going over to VELUX, right?
Yeah, those were the first steps.
Yeah.
And I think what we'd like to dig a little bit into is this relatively broad question about what actually makes salespeople succeed in their role at the front lines. And there are a lot of different takes. There are a lot of different philosophies, I think it's fair to say as well. So we're a little bit curious about, in your experience, what made you succeed in your role or roles at the front line?
Yes, it's a very broad question, as you mentioned. So it's also tough to answer, and there are different things you can believe in. But what I'm a strong believer in is, and I started coming with maybe not the ideal background, as I mentioned before, but what I always had was the 100% willingness to succeed. So I guess most things are coming by the motivation of people instead of the skills they are having, right? So technical knowledge, these all the things you can learn over time. More interesting is that your willingness is in place. And I'm a disc trainer by heart, so I believe additional that you have to understand your audience and your people you're treating with your message. And only when you understand the other side of the table, you parallel learn a lot about yourself, but you also understand how you can make them ambassadors of what you're doing. Because sales is interaction between people and not just a product. That's my belief, what I think makes you successful.
And Daniel, knowing you, you're actually incredibly engaged about what happens at the front lines, even now that you're actually in a global role. And I can't but help but wonder, is there anything you miss about being, a frontline sales rep and being out there closing the deals on your own?
Oh, definitely. I mean, sales is a bit of my heartbeat, and that's where I started, what helped me growing into what I have the pleasure to do today. But overall, I'm doing tough when looking that others are doing the deals instead of myself, right? And I'm also always opinionated. So I think, maybe you should say these additional or place these argument at that position. So it's on the one hand side tough to stay on the sideline and look on the battlefield and look what the guys are doing over there. But on the other hand side, when you're a salesperson frontline, you can impact only that one deal. And to stepping away on the sideline, it gave you the impact to have or the opportunity to have impact on the whole game. And this makes it very much engaging. But as you mentioned, missing also from time to time to be more hands-on.
Yeah. Going up and ringing that bell.
Exactly.
Close the deal.
Exactly. You're right.
I think when you transitioned into becoming a sales manager, it's a shift that many find actually really, really difficult, because a lot of the skills that make you a good sales rep, that you are out there, you're able to close, you are maybe pretty structured about your work, but you only do it for yourself, of course, with the clients, but for yourself. Right. A lot of that is quite different from what it takes to kind of sell through others and lead them and coach them. And to a lot of sales reps, high-performing sales reps, it's actually quite hard for them to put into words what it is they do and why they're actually good at selling. So how did you find that transition? How did it come about, and how did it go for you when you made the transition?
Good point. And honestly, you nailed already also a bit the problem. Therefore, that it is tough for a lot of sales reps to describe where they are good in. It's often the failure we are doing as companies that we are making our biggest rock stars to the next leaders, right? So we believe that the best person is also the best leader. But honestly, I don't think that it is like that. I think you have to split a little bit the field, what you have laying in front of you, into the superstars they can rise, because they have the skill set, what you mentioned. Irrelevant if it's skilling or willing, but they have to have the knowledge and the ability to coach others, to step back, and also to be silent. I'm doing here and there tough. I know that about myself, but this is something you have to do, and also let it happen that others are doing failures and give them the opportunity to learn by. So you have to be, as you said, the coach instead of one of the ones they are staying directly on the field and playing the game. So these are two totally different profiles, if you ask me for my opinion. And back in the 1990s, we did it more than once, that we made the best salesperson to a sales leader, but they are simply super often drilled to fail because they cannot do what a leader have to do. Hope that answers a bit.
I think it does very much, and I think what I'm a little bit curious about is actually, you were a superstar sales rep, or at least really good.
That's your wording.
That is my wording.
Yeah.
Let just take it.
Yeah.
No, but how come that you ended up succeeding whereas many others don't? I think there's some really interesting studies on actually the share of salespeople that are promoted that end up failing, and it's an overwhelming amount. So how come you didn't actually end up failing in that transition?
I guess as I worked for VELUX, I had no idea if being a sales leader will be my future or not. I was happy to be in VELUX. And then there came someone, a Danish guy working for VELUX, got my sales manager, and he have obviously seen something. So it says, honestly, more about him, that I got a great leader instead of myself. Because he had what a great coach have to have. You're seeing potential. He have to judge me by or others if I had the potential or not, but he have seen that, and honestly, it kicked open the door to my next journey in getting a leader. And he did exactly what I tell today. He let me fail, he let me do some big mistakes, but he never judged me by. He taught me by what was my takeaway from that, and this is something I'm still very grateful for. And I think he made me to a leader. It was nothing I brought very natural with me. Yeah.
Okay, that's quite interesting. If we zoom in a little bit on maybe looking at how you did in the beginning as a sales leader and how you did after, say, a few years.
Yeah.
What were the main differences? What were your kind of key learnings in those years?
In the beginning, I thought the biggest thing what I have to do is help people that they succeed in deals. So I supported them a lot with technical knowledge, hold their hands too long. So I understood also in the beginning not when is it the right thing to give just mentorship instead of real hands-on. And in the beginning, I tried to solve all their problems. But after a while, I learned that it is better to help them to solve their own problems, right? So in the beginning, I took each pressure away and I made them a little bit accountable that I'm existing and that I'm there. And I have seen it the first as I switched the team that they struggled after I was going. So my biggest learning was it's better that they have all the own tools and skills in place instead of that I'm the one who is making the road flat for them. So I guess this is one of the biggest learnings, being more the one developing them instead of solving their problems.
Yeah. I think that's a really good answer, and I think it really shows also that mental shift that actually needs to happen from being at the front line yourself, being able to kind of close everything, being accountable, like 100% taking ownership, to then, of course, still taking ownership, but doing it through others. So you're a little bit less hands-on. And I think that's part of the challenge that many sales reps face when they get promoted into sales leadership positions.
And I totally understand why they fail, because it's burning under your nails, because you're coming from there, right? Sitting and think, do that. But honestly, it's the toughest challenge to hold yourself back, right? Yeah.
Sometimes when I do, I'm out doing sales coaching, so I'm sitting, on site with some sellers and coaching them, how could you potentially be better? And I think my natural, inclination is just to, grab the phone out of their hands almost, and say this, and I've as you have, I've just realized, well, it's probably not the way to do it, at least to help them succeed in the longer term. But I think then one of the practical questions that come up, well, if I can't replicate myself onto them and help them become myself in how I conduct a phone conversation with a potential customer, what are then the tools in my toolbox for helping them succeed? Could you share some reflections on what you used to do?
Yep. I'm mirroring something what I have learned from another trainer, and this was, I mentioned that I'm also a disc trainer by profession, so I'm a strong believer in you can change no one fundamentally, and you can by far not try to change others. So the only thing what you can do is to adjust your way of your coaching and to try to help people to be the best version of yourself. It sounds a little bit wrapped up, be the best version of yourself. Of course, you can hear it everywhere, but at the end it is like it is. So when something is a very dominant profile, you will not make out of him a smooth cat, right? So you have to play with what you have. And therefore, it's also your job to accept and to understand which kind of profile you're playing around with and what is a good version, what you can make out of him. And another thing is also that you're reducing blind spots. So I'm very honest when I'm interacting with people about my private life, but also my professional life, and also about my opinions I have, how they interact. And when I'm honest and also let go through that they are doing failures, they accept it the other way around. And thereby we have then a fundament where it is okay to give constructive criticism in a good way, in a good feedback. And then you can try to not form them, it's not the right word, but to educate them to understand where they are and also show them a journey where they can come to when they are doing the right things. And this is a little bit what I try to do. So play with what you have and make the best version out of them, what they can be. Right.
Yeah. After you had been a sales manager in a few different instances, then you made the next jump, so to speak, of being even further away from the front line. Now you're sitting in a global commercial excellence, and you have 30-some markets that you are enabling to sell out there at the front line. How did that shift come about, and what were the main differences you experienced?
I had no clue on what journey I'm going over there, to be very honest. I got asked from my current manager, again, a Danish guy. I had a project regarding Germany together with him. I was the German counterfei, and he was doing it from a ComEx department perspective. And a year later, he was taking over parts of the department, and he was asking me if I can imagine to step into this role. And honestly, he sold it very charming to me and said also that it is a great opportunity to leave an even higher impact on what VELUX can be and to transform all the things, right? And this is what I tried day to day. And in theory, is that totally correct? Practical as well. But it is always trying to find the balance between think global, that it is scalable, but how can you adjust it and tailor it down to the markets that they can use it very operative in their day-to-day business, and that they are not thinking, now is coming the next crazy guy anywhere from the headquarter, what I thought back in the days. And this is something I have to remember myself super often by to say, you cannot use everything everywhere at the same time. So I got it sold, I bought it, and honestly, I'm enjoying it to minimum 50% of the time. The other time I'm hating it the same level. That's how it is, right?
Yeah, and I think you touch upon some of the like inherent complexities of being in a global function, and especially within construction. Now, I've also worked a bit with you in VELUX, and markets are just very different. They have high autonomy, and I think it comes from, of course, also the different ways of building. Some countries have vertical rafters, some have horizontal. Like the regulations are different, sizes are different, everything is different. So that, of course, also merits some differences in how the markets are set up, how they operate, and also how you implement tools. So I guess my question is, how do you manage that complexity of still actually getting something done, but also making it relevant out in all the markets that you serve?
Honestly, here and there, you cannot avoid, or I cannot avoid, to feel getting overwhelmed. But from time to time, you have to remember yourself, trust the process. So you have to find the right way how to implement. So you cannot be everywhere at the same time. And this is also reflecting on what we had before, one of the biggest differences. In sales, you can be hands-on everywhere. Of course, it's overseeable, the topics you have. In a global or in a ComEx position, it's simply not doable anymore. So you have to be better in planning and also in prioritizing topics, right? So you have to say, these markets are the first ones, then it's coming these, then it's coming those, and so on, which is okay and helps you already a bit. And you can also box markets and say the larger ones are higher on complexity, the smaller ones are so and so and so. So I would say it's doable, but you need a while for yourself to understand that you cannot be everywhere at the same time, and then you have to have a strong prior list on your desk.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Daniel. And I think you also touched upon a different, really interesting point is, the guys from Global are coming again with some project that we don't want, we don't need.
Right.
And of course, change management is at the heart of this and all this. But what are some of the practical things, in your experience, that you can do to sort of mitigate that feeling or sentiment out in the local markets? What are some of the tools in your toolbox, so to speak, to do that?
I say to each and everyone who is not anymore interested to hear that I'm coming with a sales background. So normally they trust a bit more when they understand that you walked in the same shoes, right? So this is something I'm always saying. But when you not have been in sales, you can do anything additional. You can drive out with them and you can try to gain an understanding in their day-to-day problems. Of course, we always think we solve something without that we ever ask them, right? So we solve problems that are simply not existing from time to time because we believe this must be a great logic or whatever it is. So for me, is it also often being out in the markets, but also sending my team out and say minimum an amount of code drives a year you have to do with various markets, that we are not getting the next theoretical department anywhere in a box in Denmark. So being active, being present, and going out on the road and make your hands a bit dirty. That's part of the game that they take you serious, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I really get that, and I think it's such a healthy mechanism to go out and actually see the people, both that are performing these visits, doing the sales interactions, but also who's on the receiving end. I think I can think of few commercial organizations that wouldn't benefit from actually going and talking to customers, including marketing organizations, to get a feel for who's actually out there, who are we targeting with our messages, and how does that actually resonate with them when they're out there.
Fully right. And honestly, I now don't want to give kudos to any other brands, but one of my former managers is coming from Hilti. It's very common in Germany. And what he said, irrelevant in which position you are starting, you will do minimum a half year or something like that. Can't remember the exact amount, days in sales or years in sales or whatever. So also if you're later starting in a management position in GPM, You have to gain an understanding of the needs of your customers. And I don't think if this is adoptable for each company, maybe not, but the story behind is adoptable. So go out on the road and understand if you're really solving a problem or if you're just thinking that you're solving a problem. So totally good point. Yeah.
I spoke to a different company in also in sort of building materials or construction industry recently, and what he said is when he's hiring for new employees, actually, obviously he's looking a bit at the experience and who are they as people.
Yeah.
But what he's actually also looking at is have they ever tried to renovate a house or been part of building a new house and so forth? Because what he says is, well, you can actually learn a whole lot from that process on your own. Obviously, being in that industry, it might be different examples for all sorts of others. You get your hands dirty in a different way and really understanding, the end guy here, or at least the ones that the end guys talk to, being an installer, for instance, in a VELUX context.
Good point. A bit challenging when you are hiring people that are 18 years old. So and then we cannot hire them because you have not built a house. Sorry, that's your fault. But you're right. It's a good point. You learn a lot in that process. I have two left hands, so others built the house where I'm living in for luck. Otherwise, I guess I cannot live there. But you're right. You're learning a lot from that process. But during hiring, I'm always describing an empty chair and saying I have a bunch of profiles in my team, and we are a very dominant team, or we are a very structured team, but on a profile, on a personal angle, maybe we have a lack. So that I would describe what would substitute also a team. This is something that makes more sense when we are in a commercial department, for example. In sales, it's a bit different, but I think it helps a lot that you take care on that you have a colorful team, right? Because the mix is bringing also different angles in, and that you also start best practice sharing based on what you have. Because an argument from me will be different to an argument from some other profiles by nature, and this is important.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is also that there's a kind of an element of being close to the markets and seeing what are the ones that are performing well, what are they actually doing, and then taking that and see if that can be applied in other markets too.
What means commercial excellence at the end? We try to master some things, but when you're purely theoretical department, where from do you know what does it mean to master anything? So it helps to identify the good people out on the road while you are on the road, make them to your ambassadors, and when you roll any initiative out, it helps a lot that you have an anchoring process in place, otherwise it's for nothing at any moment. So in this anchoring process, you need the talented salespeople to share their experiences that others can learn from, because often they trust them more instead of your voice. Right.
I think that's a really good point, Daniel. One of the things I'm also a little bit curious about in your role is global ComEx. I could imagine with a company like yours, as you have several different sales channels, generally you have a lot of markets, there's a lot of stuff that you can do to potentially drive commercial development. Loads of initiatives. How do you ever go about prioritizing, looking at 2025, what's up for VELUX ComEx? How does that prioritization exercise happen, and how do you do it?
Good question, and you can never learn out on that topic. And honestly, it's not for luck, not only in my hands. So it's always pressured or given from different angles. So our group strategy department is giving some topics where we believe in they make sense for next year. We are observing some, for example, commercial skill potentials via our deployment and training managers. We are getting input from our CEO and the whole C-level and so on. And then we are making once a year, and we are currently in that process, a prior matrix. And then we are listing all the topics. We are giving them points from which markets they have also been wished for. Of course, we are also gathering the wishes from the markets. And then the things that are on the upper right quartile are the ones we are prioritizing for the next year. And I mean, when our CEO is saying this is the topic for next year, it's a bit tough to say, no, it's not in the prior matrix, But the most things, it is collaborative gathered over there, and plus the CEO things. And then we have our training things in place, but also our strategic priorities for the next years in place. That's a little bit how it happens. Yeah.
If we take a little look again at you and the skill set needed again to make the transition, then again it's one skill set that made you succeed as a frontline sales rep. It's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales manager where you coach people and develop them. And then it's another one as a sales What are the differences to the skill set that makes you succeed in your current role?
I'm searching for them. No, jokes aside, you're right. Totally different sales management, and also now. And in VELUX, we stepped also away to say only people leaders, irrelevant if I'm still a people leader or leaders. Because you need, when you're now more in a project management role, also a management and leadership set, that you're taking ownership on things. So I think you have to be much more structured and organized regarding project management instead of people management. Because my employees now, I have even less contact instead of a regular sales team. Because they are managers by their own. Also, if they are not people managing, they are in a matrix organization managing topics and strategic projects they are driving forward, where I have no clue from.
Yeah.
So I have to accept that I can even less have hands-on, but I have to take care on under control that the projects are moving forward. And the skill set I need and what I have to teach meanwhile also in that role is more project, time management, etc. role. So it's less sales, it's more keeping the overview and giving people the ability to take ownership on their things, because no one else will fix it.
Yeah. I would also imagine that you're being kind of introduced to a lot more stakeholders that you'd have to manage internally.
You're totally
Maybe
right.
even a little tiny bit of politics too.
Yeah.
In such a shift.
Yeah.
I guess that takes up a bit of kind of the mental space too in your current role.
100% align. Stakeholder management is one of the big skills you need to have in place. And it's also when you're lifting other people from a local role into a global or regional role, it's always exactly the same. What stresses you out most, that you say, oh my God, 38 markets, 3 big regions. How do we bring all these things together? And you need also there on a high decision level making point, some ambassadors. So how do you form groups and conversation platforms that people can interact with each other, that do not have each stakeholder single to manage, that you can group them a little bit. So stakeholder management is the thing what makes you stay or fall. Yeah.
And I think parts of your title is deployment. And I know in VELUX you guys have some deployment managers out in the local markets.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about their role in bringing what happens, what is developed globally or what is co-developed globally and locally?
Yeah.
But what is their role in bringing that to life out there?
I would say that VELUX is coming from a background that each market had his own general manager. And then you had also super often external agencies. So there was no red line, red thread. What is the way to go to? And I'm telling it because it also affects the deployment part in my title and in my team. So we have always a strategist. How should we treat some customers? And when we know how to handle, for example, dealers, installers, or also architects as well, you also need a plan. What is the ability and the skill set a salesperson needs afterwards in place? And therefore you have always a strategist and then you have a deployment manager. So it's always a bundle of 2 persons. And we meanwhile defined a kind of a global educational roadmap for these different peoples and salespeople or out on the road you have. And the deployment and training manager is then from a global angle looking on what is the skill set we have in place, what is it where we have to educate our frontline salespeople, and thereby we are starting then training. So first we gathered and gained a global understanding, and then we designed the roadmap. Then we have to understand where our people are, because a new joiner is somewhere else instead of a person who's 10 years working for us. So we boxed it also a bit like a snake. 0 till 6 months, what do you have to learn? 6 till 2 years, what do you have to learn? And so on, and so on, and so on. And then you need a lot of check marks on your educational roadmap. And this is where for our deployment and training managers are there. And we are co-developing trainings with the support of Kvadrant, for example. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, to me, VELUX is definitely one of the commercial organizations I can see that I take change management the most seriously. And I think it's such a big strength that quite few, in other organizations, quite a few of things that are developed, they kind of die in the ivory tower where they were created far away from the market, and they never kind of reach the market. And I think that's something you do really excellently, that you take it very seriously, think it into all your projects, and the fact that you have dedicated training and deployment managers, I think if that's not a sign of it, then I don't know what is.
It's thanks for the nice words, first of all. And I guess you're super often thinking that it is common, that it is something every company must have in place, because it's so crucial when you're stepping away from a very local organized company more over to a bit more, I would not say steered, but supported, globally supported company. So therefore, it's good to know that it is obvious a good thing, what we have there in place. Yes, I think that's nice. Yeah.
One question I was thinking about is, I know you have a lot of different projects going on, but maybe could we get an example of one of the things you're doing and rolling out, just to get a little case example of what you're working with?
Right. If we use a very active sample, let's say segmentation, you must know about it. But when we talk about segmentation, what we have to do is you have to pick first the right market for a pilot, right? Because otherwise you are afterwards investing a lot of money trying to roll something out. From my point of view, it's always better when you're taking an isolated market, speaking with them and onboard them what we have to do, bring also a lot of local people in, that they have an opinion about these things. Then you're trying to formulate a pilot, and then you can afterwards use that market to spread the message out in the other markets, get them onboarded on the strategy themselves, and then you can make a plan how to roll out. And therefore you need also the VPs of your regions when you have them. In our case, we have on board that they prioritize which are the next markets and so on. But first of all, you need a solid, strong pilot market, and from there on you can move on the next steps on the road, right? Yeah.
So the pilot markets are kind of the levers where you recruit some change champions,
Right.
ambassadors that can go out and help you. Because I mean, I think for a lot of organizations, what can seem a bit overwhelming is that if you have 38 markets, if you have to do a pilot in every market, and then you have to, first involve them, then pilot, then specify and tailor, then you end up spending all your time on quote unquote just implementation. So having those markets as ambassadors for other markets is one way of
Right.
scaling that, so to speak.
Right.
But how generally do you see that balance between tailoring, making it fit for every single market, versus implementing at scale effectively?
First of all, you mentioned it in the question before, and one of the things we have on our educational roadmap is a resilience training, right? Because change management is hitting you hard, and then you have to be resilient as a person enough to deal with all the changes that are coming. So that's on the plate, definitely. What did you ask?
How do you view the trade-off between, say, efficiency and tailoring?
And it sounds a little bit rudimental. Think global, act local. That's a little bit used wording, but at the end it is like it is. Because we tried to do it different and said in the beginning we are using our segmentation model to stick at that example and bringing it out into each market exactly in the same manner. But then you believe you have everything under control, you're tapping in the market, and you do the same like in the pilot. You're onboarding the people on the field, and they are telling you a story which is totally different than the market you before. So this is the reason why I believe the backbone, the framework, and the way of acting can stay, but the way how you fill it in have to be a bit different. But it's also not a general rule. When you're tapping with another strategic project in the future, into the same situation, maybe the environment will 100% change. That you see, no, it is the same system, but just another language. So we can roll it out in the bulk. So I think you have to invest and think deeply about each strategic project, how also a rollout can look like, because it's not always the same. And this always also guides you to, there is no 100% fits all. You have to be open and also resilient for changes, otherwise you're wrong in that role.
Yeah. You can't avoid a few trade-offs.
And something I'm a little bit curious about is, stuff takes time. It takes time. It does in a large organization. That's how it is. But when you identify a new project, this would be cool to do and so forth.
Yeah.
How do you actually, come up with the right timeline to do this? Because I guess in some cases you could also have the risk of saying, but then we need to think 8 steps ahead and do this and do this, and then there's 10 years to impact. So I guess there must be a balance between, doing it right, but also we cannot think, or at least rarely can think 10 years ahead.
I guess the pressure comes very natural on these things, because normally before you're starting and investing into a project, most likely you need a bit of money. That's normally how it is.
Yeah.
And we have a commercial steering group, which is placed our EVPs in. And we are presenting the things we believe we should do. And they are saying, I like, I don't like, please describe deeper, and so on and so on. At the end, they are saying, these are the 3 things we like. And then the pressure comes automatically, and also a timeline, right? Because they are not giving you a bunch of money and saying, see you in 10 years. They are saying more, see you in a quarter, tell us a bit more about, and a quarter later, how can a timeline looks like, and a quarter later, and so on and so on and so on. And then they are also starting you at any moment, for good reasons, to measure by the impact you're leaving by this initiative. So I think you need a group in place who's also taking control on all these things, because otherwise you're getting a department which is super fancy, but is not getting measured by the impact. And then I don't want to say that you're useless, but then you're very creative, but maybe not super impactful. So you have to find a good environment that you're also getting judged anywhere by.
Yeah. And the measuring impact part,
yeah,
that can be incredibly challenging, I imagine, because the impact, it really depends on the type of project. There's a very long way from segmentation to examples of sales training, sales management, operating models, key account management. Can there be a general approach for measuring impact, or does that measuring impact depend on the case-to-case basis of each different project?
I guess it's the same with all the other projects. So I guess the framework is the same, but the content depends on the topic you're talking about. So overall, we are following Kirkpatrick's model as impact tracking tool, if you want to call it like that. So we are gathering a first reflection after we introduced and implemented anything. It's nothing more than a net promoter score. Do we have pro or demoters, or are they neutral? Afterwards, 4 months later, we are doing the same. Are they still on board? And at any moment, we are starting to measure the business impact. And business impact revenue is always a good indicator, but it is not the only thing. We are also measuring, when we look on, that we start automatically guiding who our salespeople should visit via a segmentation model. How many diverse customers do you see over the year? So do we stick to the same 50 customers we have seen last year, or can we broaden up a little bit our scope and visit also customers where we believe they are interesting, instead of where we just trust the gut feeling of our sales reps? So this could then be part of the impact tracking model. How many various customers have you seen? Is the revenue increasing from the customers you have visited? So the model is the same, the content is different. For the next marketing initiative, it will for sure not be that content part, but the same model. Yeah,
makes a lot of sense. And I think here in the kind of final stages of this conversation, Daniel, is there, if you kind of were to give some advice for somebody transitioning from a sales manager to a global ComEx function, what kind of piece of advice would you give?
Think about wisely. I would say you first of all have to reflect on yourself, because every journey starts a little bit there, right? So you have the typos. They like to have a lot of stakeholders, and you also like to interact with persons and peoples in the company. When you're focusing on, I love to interact with my customers, then it's maybe something you should take hard in consideration if it is the right thing, because even as a sales manager, you are more in contact with your people and you're seeing direct the impact. In a global role, you need a longer breath, because you cannot directly see the impact and the stamp you are leaving. So yeah, it's another condition you need. So think about for yourself wisely what motivates you to stay up each morning, and then we can talk about if you are good in a global position or not, without judging if it is a good thing or not. Yeah.
Are you ever going back to being a frontline rep or a sales manager?
Oh, that's a
big question.
It's a big question. I guess frontline salesperson, I cannot imagine, to be honest, because I meanwhile have tasted a little bit what I did after. And I also can see, even if I not have any more hands-on, the impact I can leave in another scale. So this is something I can enjoy, and this is one of the reasons why I stay up. I would not avoid to say that I will not ever step back from a global role into a regional or market role, because even how nice the work is I can do, a market is a bit more familiar, cozy, and you're closer to the direct success you can see. Today is not my right time to do that step, but I enjoy so much the learning I could gain from both positions.
Yeah. Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to visit us here in our little podcast den where we are sitting. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
So thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks a lot to both of you. It was a pleasure. And even after 10 years of VELUX, the first time to do something the first time, so super nice. And thanks to both of you.
Thank you. We'll look forward to welcoming you again and then see which role you have at that time.
Let's see. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any questions or requests, you can always contact us at info@kvadrant.dk. If you want to know even more about Kvadrant Consulting, please be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our newsletter, or go to our website kvadrant.dk.